Welcome to the On Stage podcast, where we interview musicians and members of the entertainment community. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have a creativity coach, and she's helping artists explore the secrets of a fulfilled creative life to find a balance between passion and prosperity. And her name is Lauren Spangler as well. And she's got two beautiful albums I listened to. Wonderful, wonderful. It is incredible. I will share with you that her albums, like the first one is called Sailing by the Moon. You got to listen to that one. I'll link the Spotify albums in the description. And the second one is To London with Love. That, I tell you, Lauren, that really spoke to my heart. I'm listening to it. I'm thinking, these are great. These are
Oh,
great.
thank you so much, Chris. I'm glad my cheeks hurt from smiling. That was a really nice intro. Thank you so much. Glad to be here with you today.
Can we talk about your music first, and then we'll talk about
I would
everything
love
else?
to.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I noted that one of the songs, Astronauts, what's your creative process, or what was your creative process to bring that song into fruition?
Well, thank you. I like that one too. The process varies song to song, as any songwriter will tell you, right? It's not At one point I tried operationalizing it and having like a workflow and giving myself like a step by step, and that just killed the spark right out of the process. So the process is never the same. For me, the best songs are the ones that I like the most. I usually write the melody and the lyrics together. They usually come together, at least for a piece of the song, and then I'll piece them together for the rest of the song. But for Astronauts, I had this idea for a song about this connectivity and this unity and this like rhythm and this pulse that kind of pulls everything together. And I think the first verse came out first as that idea was sort of forming when I was at the piano, kind of like in writing mode, just improvising and stuff. And then that one, the melody carried a lot of the song. And the words, I remember I struggled with the second verse. I always struggle with the second verse, man. That's the hardest spot for me. And I remember being in like a pancake house with my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and we were trying to figure out what that second verse would be. And we had like four napkins full of verses that stunk until we figured out what the words would look like. So the first verse came out pretty easily on that one. The last piece took a bit more work.
Very beautiful. It comes out of your soul, bursts out of your
Thank
soul
you.
from experience, like most musicians who write music basically through an experience. I'm afraid to ask you what astronauts, like, did you go into space or something and you wrote the song?
No, my mom always wanted to be an astronaut. My grandfather was an astrophysicist, and my mom didn't wind up being an astronaut. She wound up being a mathematician and a computer programmer and a mom. Personally, I'm glad she stayed Earthside because, I like the life she wound up having. But there was a lot of magic and sort of, mysticism around space, and the thought of an astronaut's journey always really fascinated me. And I remember traveling to the Space Center down in Florida, the Kennedy Space Center, I believe, in Florida. Anyway, listening to these interviews with these artists or these astronauts talking about what it's like to zoom out in the biggest possible sense and look at the Earth through a tiny window of a spaceship, and like what that does to a person just fascinated me. And I actually got a chance to meet an astronaut a few years later. Had nothing to do with writing the song, totally separate, just coincidental through some common connections. And it was interesting to hear him talk about his experience. And he had that moment floating out in space, going, "Oh my gosh, I still feel connected to this pulse and this rhythm of life down on the surface, so far away from me." And that was beautiful just to hear, like, yeah, it's a real thing.
When you were younger, did you go around? My mother wanted to be an astronaut, so what was going through your head?
I have scientists all through my family tree. My grandfather was the astrophysicist, and
Wow.
yeah, he had an incredible career. He discovered gamma radiation, back in the 60s. I mean, he was really top of his field. Yeah, it was funny growing up in a family that was so math and science oriented because then I came out wanting to draw and sing and be a musician. And I was super lucky because my family was deeply supportive of that. And I never felt like an odd man out or black sheep or anything. But yeah, I'm tremendously proud of the scientists in my family and the astrophysicists in my family and the nuclear physicists in my family. And a lot of pride in that legacy, even though I'm not personally really carrying it forward.
Is it something dealing with education? You just didn't think you were intelligent enough, or you just wanted to break the cycle of astrophysicists and astro something?
No, nothing like that. I just didn't, I never liked doing my math homework as much as I liked playing piano. And I would find I loved studying. I loved math and well, I loved math more than science, I guess. And I was pretty good at it. Calculus never lit me up the way music theory did. Just gravitated towards the things I wanted to spend my time doing, and that happened to be creative work.
Where did the melodies and the music come from? Are there anybody else in your family who are musically inclined?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So I have my family is music lovers, so my parents always loved going to the symphony and going to music theater, and there was a lot of music in our home. My mom was always playing the radio. My dad played piano and guitar and sang and was a songwriter and did all of those things. Even though he was an engineer by trade,
Mm.
he was a music lover and a music maker. And some of my early memories being tiny, I remember sitting on his lap with his arms around me while he was playing Scott Joplin on the piano and Maple Leaf Rag. And so there was definitely our house was full of music. And as I grew up, my parents were really supportive and connected me with teachers and lessons and training and exposure to all the great works. And so yeah.
Well, I really understand that. I also another song, "No More Talk of Winter," has whistling part in it. Whose idea was that?
I worked with a wonderful producer named Scott Ferris based out of Lubbock, Texas. And he and I had a lot of fun producing the songs I brought into the studio with him. I don't remember which one of us well, there's a little bit of whistling in the album Sailing by the Moon. There's a little bit of kazoo, and there's a little bit of really, really high singing that sounds like whistling. And that comes from at the time I was training classically as a coloratura soprano, and I was experimenting with, what is it like to try to bring that classical super high range into kind of a more contemporary, like Baroque pop type of song and piece. Turns out, looking back, I don't love the coloratura soprano moments in my music as much as I did at the time when I was writing them, but that's how it goes. But yeah, so the No More Talk of Winter featured some of that classical singing in more of the contemporary kind of pop, uh, context.
Beautiful. So
Thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
you have a fantastic vibrato and "Sailing by the Moon." I'm listening to that song, listening to I'm like, wow, she's got a gorgeous vibrato. Wow.
Thank you.
So is "Sailing by the Moon" and astronauts, are they synonymous with each other?
Yeah, there was a theme going on there for sure. Astronauts came first, and then Sailing by the Moon came later. And I think that one started with, oh boy, I'm trying to remember now. It's been more than a decade, but I think that started with the lyrics and the concept. At that time, I was away from home at college. I was pretty far away. I'd never really lived away from home for a super long time, and I was feeling pretty disconnected. But like I was on this important trip, right? Like I was going to learn and grow and become this new thing. And then,
Hmm.
my intention was to return back to my hometown, which is where I am now. And Sailing by the Moon is about this experience of being far away from what you know and missing it and going out and exploring, and at some point going, okay, yeah, I'm ready to turn back around and head back to home base. And yeah, that's what I was going through at that point in life. And then I think the music kind of unfolded around that concept.
And then out of your heart came this song called "All My Love." Um,
Yeah.
it had, I don't know if you're familiar with the song "Color My World" by Chicago, but it sounds just like that.
I have to look that one up. I don't
Yep,
know
I
that
was listening
song.
to it. It sounds just like Color My World by Chicago. It's
Well,
amazing.
that's cool. That's cool. I actually was inspired by Unchained Melody by the Righteous Brothers.
Yeah,
Um, love that song. Super, super close to my heart. That actually wound up being the song my husband and I danced to as our first dance at our wedding. And all my love was written to him when I think we were engaged when I wrote that one.
amazing song. Yep, has a
Thank
Color
you.
My World vibe to it. And I think Delilah has a Shania Twain vibe to it. I like that song. Did you ever
That was a
realize
fun
that?
song. Yeah, man, I love that one. It has such a different energy than everything on the album, but that was the most fun song to write. That was the most fun song to record. The most fun for me to listen to now when I listen back to that album. And that process was totally different. Usually, when I sit down to write a song, especially back then, I was really serious and really like almost academic in how I would approach the song. And it was like this really heavy thing to go write a song. And Delilah was so different because um, my husband and I were hanging out. We're dating at the time. I think I've mentioned him like 3 or 4 times. You can tell he's definitely part of my creative process. So we were hanging out and we were house sitting for these lovely friends of ours who had this big, beautiful home and this wonderful piano right in the middle of the house. And when you'd play this piano, it would just echo through the house and it was beautiful, especially compared to like my dorm room with a keyboard and headphones, which was not as awesome of an experience. So he and I are hanging out in this house and I'm just improvising on the piano. And I was like, hey, hit some keys, like hit some random keys. My husband doesn't play piano, and I'll write you a song out of it. And so he like hit some random stuff, and that wound up becoming the pieces of what turned into that riff in Delilah. I was like, okay, this is fun. Just say a random phrase, like say some random words. And then I'll just make you some lyrics out of that. So we were just super playful and super silly and irreverent. And it was very light. And over the course of maybe an hour, wound up just kind of like playing the heck out of that and just improvising that song. And it turned out to be one of my favorites, but came to be in a much less heady, kind of cerebral way than a lot of my other work sometimes does.
I wondered why you have personally decided to walk away from music because when I was listening to Bella Luce from To London with Love album, it had sounded a lot like a Michael W. Smith song. Are you familiar with Michael W. Smith?
I'm writing down another one. You're giving me good recommendations today, Chris.
Yep, Bella Luce has this Michael W. Smith type sound and feeling to it. And basically, I was like, wow, this is a song. So I added a lot of these to my Spotify playlist. I'm just
Oh,
happy about
thank
that.
you.
And
Thank you. I will say I haven't walked away. I haven't turned my back on music, but I've changed the way I'm making things now and changed the way I'm sharing things. And at this moment in time, yes, it's been a while since I published anything, but I've
mm,
been making a lot behind the scenes, and I think there'll be more released at some point in the future for sure.
well, if you do release another CD, make sure that you autograph it for me because I always love receiving autographed copies of
Absolutely.
CD.
Well, send me your mailing address.
Love it. Can't wait. And the final song I'm interested in is one called The Graveyard Song. Now, Loren, I was listening to Graveyard Song, and the one song that came to my head, and you better actually write this one down. There's a group called Retrophile, and they have a song called I Dig My Grave. So that's what made
Wow.
me think that so first you dig your grave, and then you call it the Graveyard Song. Both like two songs that kind of match together.
Hmm.
So really interesting.
Well,
I
thank
know.
you. That one I wrote in London and recorded in London. Actually, we could talk about. I don't know if you're interested in recording stuff, but I totally did that one on the cheap as part of a challenge I set for myself to try to write 100 or to try to write and record 10 songs in 100 days with $1,000. And so that's where all of the Two London with Love songs actually came out of that challenge. But the Graveyard Song is another one of my favorites. And that one is deeply, deeply personal for me. It has so much meaning. And it was inspired by this graveyard that I would walk through. So when I lived in London, I was about a mile from the grocery store and I couldn't afford the bus fare. If it tells you much about how I was living in London. Loved it, loved it, loved it, but had to walk a lot of places. And so one place I had to walk was to the grocery store. So every single week I walked through this graveyard and it was beautiful, first of all. And you'd read the headstones and it would be like, people who died in the 1600s. I mean, it was this
Hmm.
just stunning place to be. And I had actually lost my dad a couple years before that. And you know, he led a wonderful life. He was a wonderful man, but it was a very sad story, sad ending to his life, and we lost him sooner than I wish we had.
Mm.
And so I was sort of processing the loss of him and processing, how and why and when he had died, and just this whole really complicated, deeply challenging thing. And every single week, walking through this graveyard and witnessing people who are very freshly in mourning. Once in a while, there would be a burial like happening as I was walking through, or thinking about these people who had passed so long ago. It just sort of gave me this wonderful space to sort of meditate about loss and life and grief and what that all means. And so that's what the graveyard song came from, was sort of me capturing the sense that I made of all of that.
I lost my dad over 20 years ago, so I know what it's like.
Mm,
And he
I'm sorry.
lung and liver cancer. It was just terrible. So,
Yeah.
have memories. And this May 29th will be 23 years. So it's really hard.
Wow. Yeah, it's
So
challenging.
it is
Yeah.
challenging. How did you, how were you able to, how did your life experiences shape your aspirations and career choices? Like you didn't walk away from music, you just kind of hid it somewhere inside your heart and soul.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I always wanted two things. Well, actually, the first thing I wanted to be was a farmer because I thought you could just sort of wear pigtails and ride horses all day. And so when I was 5, I thought being a farmer would be great. Eventually, when I kind of figured out a little more about the world, there were two things I always wanted to do and to be. The first was an artist. I loved to play piano. I love to sing. I love to paint. I love to write. I love to draw. Just all of the arts. I wanted to do that with every hour of the day that I could. And the other thing I wanted to be was a mom. And I wanted to have sort of this peaceful, stable, wonderful white picket kind of life that I was lucky enough to have myself growing up. And so when I went through high school and college and went to study, I studied the arts. And then after I graduated, I was sort of living out that dream, dream A, and being an artist, being a professional musician, performing, recording, a little bit of teaching, all just sort of in the world of art and music. And at some point, after enough years, I started to realize it wasn't going the way I thought it was going to. It wasn't unfolding the way I wanted it to. I was it was financially not working out. My business, my, sole proprietorship as a musician was like belly up. I
Hmm.
had none of the business skills that I needed to actually think like an entrepreneur in running my creative business. I was working in kind of a challenging environment, kind of a challenging time for the music industry in general. 2010 through 15 was a rough time to be starting out as a musician. And most importantly, I hadn't really built the inner resilience and the right mindsets and the right endurance and stamina to make it through the challenges of all of that. I thought it was going to be a much more linear process than it was. And what I wound up doing is getting into this really dysfunctional, sort of toxic place with my own creativity. And it started to become something totally different than what it was when I first fell in love with it. So at a certain moment in time, I took a hard left and decided, okay, I'm gonna go get health insurance. I'm gonna go, get a stable job and be able to pay the bills and have that sense of financial security that I was missing. And that felt really important to me, especially as I was thinking about building a family and bringing children into the world. And the level of stability I wanted to provide them was something that art was not providing me at that time. And so I did just a total about face. I flew back home from London, moved back to my hometown, got a corporate job, which I wound up loving. It was a great job with great people at a great company. And so I sort of just started building in this other direction and said, okay, dream A didn't work. So now it's time for dream B. So I'm going to build the stable life. I'm going to have the family. It's going to be wonderful. And it was wonderful. And for about 7 years, I didn't look back. I was like, this is good. This is so much easier. The struggling artist life was really hard. And the, stable person who's able to provide for herself, like this is much better. But then about 7 years in, I started to realize that that desire to make art and the desire to make music, like it didn't go anywhere. It was still there. I still felt this calling to be an artist. There was a slight moment of crisis where it was like, uh-oh, maybe if I'm not an artist, I'd start to feel hollow and bitter and like this is not good. The trajectory of my satisfaction was not trending the way I wanted it to. And so then I hit this other fork in the road where I'm like, okay, I now have built my life around stability. I have a mortgage to pay, I have kids to feed. I've built my entire life around a certain level of structure and security that I'm not willing to sacrifice. But I also am not really willing to not be creative. Like, I've got to go make something. I've got to go share work with people. I've got to go write music and paint and write because these are the things that really, really matter to me and make me feel like I'm filling my purpose. And so that was a few years ago. And I started to write music again. I started to paint again, started to share my work online. Have not yet recorded and released an album, but the list of songs that are ready for recording on an album is now big and overflowing again, which feels so, so good. And so the process of weaving that back in and figuring out how to be creatively fulfilled and financially stable has been my obsession for the last few years. And it's been very rewarding. And I'm glad to say now I am actually living dream A and dream B at the same time, which feels awesome.
So this obsession that you have, and also you were doing everything blood, sweat, and tears just to be where you are now. How did you manage your mental health? What were some
Mm.
things that you did to keep your sanity without falling apart?
Well, I didn't back a decade ago, which is probably why I wound up in creative burnout and wound up checking out completely and like dropping off a cliff with it, is because I didn't tend to my wellness. I didn't tend to my mental state as well as I should have. Now I tend to it in a totally different way. So now I prioritize that. I come to creativity from a place of um, how can I enjoy this process? How can I share my work in a way that is rewarding and fulfilling instead of, terrifying and where I'm looking for, validation, like all the things that made it so painful to try to share and put myself out there before. Now I don't feel like I'm putting myself out there in like this judgy sense. Now I feel like I'm sharing the work that matters to me and I'm simply spreading like the joy of, I made this thing and I love it and I hope you love it. And if you do love it, I love that you love it and that's great. Like it's just so much easier that way, right? So I benefited from coaching from a variety of different teachers and mentors and guides who helped me understand how to do that. And that's what I focus on a lot in creativity coaching now is for those artists who either feel torn between creative freedom and stability, or for the artists who are not taking care of themselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually throughout the creative process. How can I support them? How can I teach them those same techniques and strategies to be able to take care of themselves so that their creativity brings them fulfillment and doesn't drain their joy or their stability or fill in the blank.
Good job. Good thing you did that because you could have spiraled out of control. And you're no good
Yeah.
wife doing that.
Yeah, I don't help anyone when I'm miserable, right? I don't it's no fun for anyone. And the work that I made actually didn't benefit either. Like we have this kind of archetype I think culturally of like the tormented artist who just slaves over their work and they create the masterpiece. And what I have found is actually when you're tormented and you're slaving over your work, you're not making your best work. When you're enjoying your work and you're grounded and you're rooted and you're stable, you're having a blast doing what you're doing, that's contagious and that comes through, and the people who hear your work then are going to receive that same vibe. And so, yeah, I think misery does not actually give us any extra street cred as an artist.
Exactly. What did you think that people would uh, take away from you with your not only your music but your artwork? Which I was looking on your website. You have one called "To the Stars and Back," and
Yes,
tender
yes.
moments of owls, and then you're holding one up there with a rabbit lifting its child,
Yeah.
which is so cute.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of parenthood, motherhood, family themes in my work. I started painting in earnest when my children were really young, and I had painted a lot of those pieces with a baby, sort of strapped to my chest, and
Hmm.
um, yeah. So I do like to paint now, and I do like to do music. And but your question was, what do I think people will take away from it?
As a
Hmm.
creativity coach, as a strategist, as an artist, as a musician, what do you want people to take away from your experience?
I would hope to be an example of the fact that your identity as an artist can be fully expressed and fully enjoyed alongside other priorities in your life. You can be a prolific artist. I'm not calling myself prolific, but by the time I'm 85, I would hope to be prolific. Like I would hope, right? Over the course of my lifetime, I would love to have this like full, body of work. But you can be a prolific artist and you can be a stable provider. You can be a devoted musician and you can be a deeply involved and engaged parent. Um, you can do all of these things. It's not an either or. I guess that's what I would like people to take. It's not oil and water. There's no either or. It's not one or the other. It's a both and. It's this glorious and that by becoming a fully alive artist, capital A, like musician, painter, whatever that is for you, by becoming fully alive in that identity, you actually elevate the other parts of your life. It's not like you take away from, your family or whatever in order to go pour yourself into your work. When you pour yourself into your work, that that awakens your spirit in a way that makes you a more playful and engaged and aware and present mother. Or I even found when I started doing creative work again, I became a better employee. I was better at work. Like I had this assumption, oh, I have to quit my day job to go be an artist, which was a total lie. Like that wasn't true at all. I actually, when I went and was an artist again, I got better in my day job because I was no longer resenting it. Because I'd wake up in the morning and go, yeah, you know what? Today is going to contain everything that matters to me. I'm going to play some music. I'm going to paint. I'm going to go to work for several hours. I'm going to get a great paycheck. I'm going to pay the mortgage. And I'm going to spend the evening with my family. Like all of the things that are important can coexist. And I don't think we have a lot of good examples for that. So I hope when someone looks at my work and looks at my story, maybe they see for themselves a new path where they can bring all the things that matter into one experience for themselves.
Well, being a painter, writer, and musician yourself who enjoys your creative consistency, financial abundance, and lasting fulfillment, are you expecting these artists with a capital A to have this happen to them and thank you for it? Have you ever had an issue with someone who didn't take your word for it, or who had a, what do you call it, emotional breakdown, whatever, because of your consistency, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I have to be careful as a coach to be clear that I'm not a therapist. And so there are definitely circumstances in which someone is struggling with a true mental health issue. And I am not qualified. I'm not the person to help them through that. And so um, when I have worked with clients who, I mean, but at the same time, creativity and expression and all of that, a lot of times brings us really face to face with some of those struggles, right? And we have to be like deeply emotionally aware and vulnerable. And so, like, there's some overlap. So there have been times where I'm working with a client and it's clear that we're starting to get into deeper waters than I am certified to help them with. And in those cases, I try to always connect them with the right support or encourage them to go get the right qualified expert to help them through those things. So I would like to help, or I would like to think that my support would never lead someone to those deep waters and get them in trouble there. But yeah, I meet artists at all different places on the path. Some people I meet when they're right at the beginning and they're just exploring this idea that like they're playing with actually going and doing this creative thing they've always dreamed of doing. Other people I meet when they're, a decade or two in and they're going, "Whoa, this doesn't feel like it used to. Where did all my inspiration go? Where did all my joy go? How come this feels, draining? Like what's going wrong here?" And so, yeah, I sort of pop in and out at different phases on the path for everyone. So there's not always a totally predictable outcome because they're all facing different hurdles, right?
Yeah, everyone's different. What would you consider, like I read all about finding the sweet spot. What is the sweet spot and what if they don't find it?
Oh, here's an unsatisfying answer for you, Chris. The sweet spot is deeply personal. My sweet spot is different than your sweet spot. And so when I'm working with a client, one of the first things we do is take an inventory and try to understand what is really the most important to them. Like peeling back the layers, honest to goodness, on your deathbed, what are you going to be glad you spent your life doing? That type of level of deep question, like what is really important? And once we know what that is, then we can start to orient things. We find the true north, and then we can start to sort of point things toward it. And that's when we start to negotiate a sweet spot and figure out what the right balance looks like and how they actually like on a mindset level, like how they conceive of themselves and the balance of the different hats they wear, but then on a really tangible level, like of 24 hours in the day, how do you spend that budget of time, like really concretely, how does this fit in? So sweet spot is different for everyone, but the process for how we get to the sweet spot can be consistent. It sometimes follows the same framework.
What would you consider to be one of your greatest challenges in life?
I am multi passionate and I love to do a lot of things. And frankly, I'm good at a lot of things. And it's been challenging at times to choose what I really want to do. And I struggled for a long time with thinking I had to just pick one thing that I really wanted to do. Um, I think all of us have a diverse suite of interests and skills and talents and passions, and we really limit ourselves when we feel like we need to pick one thing to define ourselves by. That challenged me for a really long time because I would pick one thing, say, okay, I'm just a musician, you know, and then I would try to have discipline and focus around that and not get distracted by these other things. Then I would find myself feeling out of balance and feeling like these other parts of me, the part that wanted to write, the part that wanted to, whatever, coach people, the part that wanted to, all these other pieces weren't getting attended to. So then I would say, okay, maybe it's not music. Maybe the one thing I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to go be a writer. So then I would go write a few chapters of a book and I would not get distracted by my music or whatever. And then of course I'd fall into the same trap where I wasn't feeling fulfilled, I wasn't feeling balanced. And so over time I've figured out that there's not just one thing on the name tag and there shouldn't be. And it's kind of limiting for us to assume that it needs to be. But there are days where I still struggle with picking how to spend my time, and I have to kind of walk myself through the process of figuring out the right balance.
How do you embrace your artistic identity and make time for creative pursuits? Any famous musicians you worked with?
No, no famous musicians. I could be cagey, Chris. I could say, well, I can't tell you who my client list is. The truth is there's nobody on there you'd recognize. There's no big names at this moment in time. Maybe in a couple years. I'd love to have a better answer, but not today.
Have you ever had a desire just to give up on everything because too much for you? Because you got your husband, you have your children, you gotta You have like a life, that personal life, and then you have this life as strategist, if I can say it right,
Mm-hmm.
an artist, musician, all in one, and then you're dealing with your mental health. So,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is the end result of where do you want to find yourself? Let's say, like you said, by the time you're 85, you hope you. But where do you want to find yourself a year from now?
Mm. I love what I'm doing now. I would love to be doing exactly what I'm doing, just in a bigger and broader way with more impact, reaching more people, helping more people. You asked a question in there about, do I ever want to just give it all up and throw, just go, this is too much and just clear
Hmm.
the plate. I know now that that feeling is a signal to me. Um, there have been lots of times where I've thought like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. This is too much. I can't do this. And a decade ago, I believed that thought and got wrapped around the axle around that thought, and it triggered this whole spiral, and I would spend days or weeks or longer feeling like I just had to give it all up. And now I recognize that that thought is not a truth. That thought is not an actuality. That thought is a reaction to overwhelm and maybe overload, and it's a signal from me that, okay, yeah, maybe I need to take a rest, maybe I need a little break. The villain here is not that there's everything on my plate, it's that maybe I need to care for myself in a better and different way while I continue to do all those things that are still important to me. I don't want to give all that up. I don't want to give any of it up because it's all there for a reason, and I'm just going to come back to it. Like, that's what I've learned about myself. If I swear off of something because it feels hard or it feels heavy, I'm just going to wind up doing the same thing because I want to, because it's in my bones, it's in my spirit. Like, I want to go be an artist, be a musician, be a coach, be a strategist, be a mom, be a wife. Like, these things are deeply, deeply important and enjoyable to me. Now I'm a lot more aware of how I'm feeling as I'm doing those things. And so I check in with myself pretty often, and I'll be honest, it's been at least a year or two since I've had that feeling of like, this is too much. I should let go of it all. Because now I also am aware of what feelings precede that, the feeling of pressure, the feeling of, that hamster wheel feeling. I've come to a place now where I can observe those things in myself and go, oh, okay, I'm doing that thing that I do. I'm doing the Lauren thing where I don't stop and take a rest. I'm going to now prescribe myself a break. I'm going to take an entire weekend off and just relax with my family, or I'm going to do whatever it is to like fill the cup again before I try to pour out of it. And I've avoided that deep overwhelm feeling by being aware of the patterns that often lead up to it, and then doing what I know I need to do to take care of myself and get back on course.
How about your time management? Have you been able to do that perfectly?
Well, no one's able to do it perfectly. Anyone who says they can do time management perfectly is lying to you and trying to sell you an online course. However, that said, I am a strong believer in patterns. I am a strong believer in understanding what our patterns are. How are you showing up in your work? What are the loops you're always falling into? Am I always telling myself, am I always excited to sit down and have, write a song and then I walk away frustrated? That's an interesting pattern. If that's happening all the time, that deserves some attention. Patterns can inform us on where our habits are breaking down, because what patterns point to is the small actions and habits and decisions that we make all the time that have a compounding effect and lead to the results we experience. And so, in terms of time management and the patterns there, I think it's very important to be very mindful about the rhythms we set up for ourselves. And for me, being able to do all the things that matter to me has hinged on being able to set up healthy patterns. And so, in my life, my routine, I have found ways to do that consistently. I know what those patterns should be. I know how often I'm expecting myself to engage in those things. So, like, here's a concrete example. A while ago I started doing this thing where I take 1 hour a day, and I call it my golden hour because it's like this golden shining, part of my day. And for 60 minutes, I have a few rules for myself. One rule is I've got to do whatever feels good at the time, whatever feels fun at the time. I can't be on the internet.
Mm.
I can't take any less than 60 minutes. So if I'm like drawing and whatever and it starts going badly and I don't like how the pieces go, I've got to keep staying in that creative space for the full
Mm.
60 minutes. I can do a different piece. I could throw that one in the trash can and try again. But what I can't do is get up and go flop on the couch and watch Netflix now because I'm numbing out the experience of my disappointment that my, right, you've been there. I know it. I also can't take more than 60 minutes, right? So I can't go into this long 5.5 hour creative bender, which is then going to be too much and swing me out of balance and I'm neglecting other things and whatever. And I got to do it 5 days a week.
Mm.
5 days a week, I show up for an hour with myself and say, great, what do I want to work on? What am I feeling like creating today? And a lot of times there's continuity. Like I'm working on the same painting I started yesterday. I'm going to keep working on it today, or I'm writing the tail end of that song or whatever. But that's been a really healthy pattern for me. And it's surprising with just an hour a day how that has added up over time and how much work I've been able to create. And that's been a really healthy routine. So little things like that, finding when that time is, for me, that hour happens after my kids go to bed. My husband and I actually trade hours. So he takes a golden hour every day, just like I take a golden hour every day. And during that time, we can close the door, we can focus. No one's going to ask us for anything. We know the other parent has it if the kid, needs something or whatever. And then when I exit that space and I've had that chance to focus on my work, when I walk back out of my studio, then I'm so much more present and engaged and aware. And I'm like really glad to be there with my kids. And I'm not, half my brain isn't going, oh, when am I going to go work on that piece? Because I got a chance to do it. So yeah, I think routines and time management are important, but I think it's a lot deeper than just saying, okay, I'm going to block my calendar and that's it. Like there's mindset pieces there, there's support system pieces there. Ask for the help from people who are going to make those routines effective for you. And a lot of that is what I help my clients with.
When you talk about mental health, not about you, because you have family. So it's not just you that have to deal with mental health, it's also your husband and your kids. And I noticed that you're spending a lot of time with your children, especially when I read that you're doing geocaching. I mean, that's fun.
It's a blast.
It's a blast, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
just what you find and just it's amazing. Like, how do you feel about that geocaching? Doesn't it feel like fun? It's
It's great. It's so much fun. It's like a real life treasure hunt. So
hmm
for anyone listening who doesn't know, you log into this app and there are all these places people in your city have hidden things and you use the app to go find the things and then when you find it you write your name on the little log and whatever. It's very fun. Yeah, it's something we like to go do as a family and for me it's the quality of time, time management, family time, like the intersections there. The quality of time is just as important as the quantity of time. So if I have 2 hours on a Saturday with my boys, they're 5 years old and 3 years old. And so there's a lot of energy there. Like, they're young kids. And so this is a team sport. You got to be all in when you're hanging out with a 5 year old and a 3 year old boy. So if I have 2 hours on a Saturday and I'm spending that time halfway engaged with them because I'm also trying to do some like business email and I'm also like wishing that I was working on that painting that I've been putting off for 3 weeks and I was also whatever, then the quality of that time and the quality of that connection really suffers. And then they're pulling on my sleeve like, hey, mom, when can we do? What are we going to do? And, it's just like this awful feeling. I don't like that. I'm not interested in that. That's not how I want to spend my Saturday. So now, instead, I find that when I bring intentionality to the other pieces of my life, so when I'm coaching and I'm fully with my clients and I am totally invested in that, and then when I'm done coaching, I'm done coaching. When I'm painting, I'm in my golden hour, I'm fully focused, I'm fully present, and when I'm done painting, I'm done painting. And that way, when I'm with my kids, I can be fully with my kids. I can say, hey, we've got 2 hours. Let's go geocaching. Everybody get your tennis shoes on. We're going to load up in the car. Let's go. Because there's nothing else vying for my time and attention. I am just with them. And I know that that is what the time is for. And that is where I want to spend my attention and my focus. That has made every aspect, everything I spend time on is better when I'm just there with whatever I'm doing right then.
when you mention your kids are like 5 and 3 and thinking of the energy they have, I know that kids have so much energy. Don't you wish you could just bottle that energy and sell
Yes.
it? Because we
Yeah.
adults lose that energy, and we're like, meanwhile, the 5-year-old is
Yeah.
running, and we're
I
just
know.
like,
I always laugh at
yeah.
bedtime, especially. I'm like, the people who want to go to bed are
Mhm.
putting to bed the people who don't want to go to bed. Like this is hard. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a lot. It's a bit of a marathon. Very much worth it.
it is worth it. Yeah. Now you also like to read books. So what is the last book that you read?
Oh, I read Circe by Madeline Miller. I don't know if you've heard of Circe. Madeline Miller is a wonderful author. This is a fiction book. It's based around the Greek goddess from the Odyssey, like Homer's Odyssey, like back
Hmm.
back in the day. Back in the day stories here. So what Madeline Miller did was she took the character of Circe, who is this witch who lives on an island, who in Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus comes and like comes to the island and has these interactions with Circe, and she's kind of like a bad character. She's a bit of an antagonist. Madeline Miller takes Circe and puts her in the hero role. She becomes the protagonist in the book Circe, and it's just beautifully written, and it was a wonderful, wonderful novel. It's pretty long, but I kind of flew through it. So definitely recommend that book.
I can't tell you what the last book I read, but I'm thinking actually of starting to write books because you inspire me to do better. I was given this book for my birthday. It's called Keto Barbecue because I'm on keto and I lost
Mm.
like 40 pounds. And
Oh, nice.
basically, this is only for people who have a barbecue, and it's to
Mhm.
create barbecue. And I don't have a barbecue grill because I'm not in a place at the moment where we have a barbecue. So,
Yeah,
but
that
I
makes it hard to barbecue.
appreciate the gift. And I also had some artwork I wanted to show you, but I brought everything here last Friday, but you didn't show up. But I'm just anyway. It's okay.
Yeah, you should do it. You should if you're feeling the pull to go write a book or make some art. What I think people get scared off by the thought of, especially with long form work like a book. A book is a huge commitment. And I think it can feel like you're signing a mortgage when you decide to write a book. I encourage people to, instead of signing up to write a book, just decide to go write a chapter, see what it feels like to write the chapter one of your idea, and then if you like that, then sign up to write chapter two and see how it goes from there.
I love filmmaking, and my desire is to actually write a script to get my very first movie film, sort of like a drama type,
Cool.
sci-fi, something. I like to do that. I have a lot of ideas in my head, and a
That's
lot of the
fun.
characters and who they can be and what they could be. So I mean, and with superhero, not that I'm interested in superheroes, but I do watch them. What hasn't been done where a person will become a superhero? No, I
Yeah.
mean, like, everything's been done from, like, how Bruce Banner became the Hulk, how
There's
Wonder
never been
Woman
a
became
barbecue superhero,
the
Chris. There might be
barbecue.
room. There's something there, maybe. I don't know.
That's funny. So, apart from your husband and your father, are there any other influential people, mentors who guided you during your early stages?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'm lucky. I have three parents. I have my mom, my biological dad, who I lost when I was 19, and my dad, my adoptive dad. I call him both my dad. It's very confusing for everyone close to me because when I say dad, they don't know who I'm talking about. But my mother remarried when I was 9, and she married my father, who has also been a tremendous influence. He is not a musician himself, but he's a music lover and he's a big supporter. He and my mom have always encouraged me, and it's simple. It's simple. It's like they cared about what I cared about. They cared about that I cared about it, and they encouraged me to go out and do stuff and try stuff. And that was huge. Like those little nudges from the people closest to me in my world. My little sister, when I was growing up, she was a huge fan. I would make a song and she would listen to it a million times on repeat. And that felt really, really good. It felt like the work I did mattered to someone and was enjoyed by someone. Even as an adult, I think the biggest inspirations for me, or uh, the fanning of the flame or whatever, sometimes comes from the people who are in that innermost circle. And what I found is when I was young, I had this really small circle of people who I really cared about their opinion. And now that I'm older and I have a larger circle of people that I reach, there's still like kind of a small circle of people who I really care what they think, and I really want to know if what I made brought them something good. And so anyway, just on like an emotional support level, that inner circle of family has been really, really supportive and inspiring. And then in terms of influences, I love living in the age of the internet because you can be inspired and mentored and taught by someone you've never met. You can have profound influence from someone who doesn't even know your name because you can intake. I mean, we've always been able to read books from influential people and learn from teachers that way, and that's great. And I think the internet has added a whole new facet to that, where now you can watch videos and you can really get into someone's world and you can hear them speaking in podcast conversations and you can do whatever and you can really absorb their philosophies. So there are definitely people I have learned from in that way. Yeah, Austin Kleon is one, Elizabeth Gilbert is one, Natalie Dawn and Jack Conte of Pomplamoose and also Patreon. There are a lot of people in the industry who I absolutely revere and who do not know me from Adam, but have had a profound impact in my life.
You mentioned Pamplemousse. Wow,
Do
that's
you
very.
know Pomplamoose?
I knew
They're a
Pamplemousse.
great
Yeah.
band.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. They're awesome. I knew about Pomplamoose a long time ago before they were like quite as big as they are now. And I actually went and saw them in Colorado and got to like meet Natalie and Jack. It was so
Yeah.
cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
They're pretty awesome.
That's strange that you would bring that up because I only know two other people that heard of Pamplemousse. And when you said
I don't
Pamplemousse, like,
meet very many people who know them. Yeah, I'm shocked that you knew who I was talking about.
yeah,
That's
I love
cool.
the group. Yeah, I see their. I go to YouTube and I watch their videos all the time. Really good. They're really good singers. Really, really
They're
fantastic.
amazing. They're amazing. And they're some of the first people, I think they are the first people who did the YouTube video, back in 2006 or 8 or something like that. I think I first saw them in 2009, but anyway, they started to video themselves actually making the music. Which now is not a big deal. Like that's not groundbreaking anymore, but they were the first ones to actually make a video where as you're watching them on YouTube, you're seeing clips and video of everything you're hearing in the track. That was at the time, that was kind of a revolutionary thing to do. And that was super inspiring. And then so when I was recording To London with Love, I was recording it in my flat in London with just this totally like pieced together. We'll call it innovative. I'll use the word innovative. It was not innovative. It was just me piecing together what I had in my flat to try to like possibly get a good clean track. But I was inspired by them because I saw them in these videos recording in their room and doing these things using what they had on hand to create really high quality music. And so then I was in my flat like, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can find a way to make a sound isolation booth by, hanging a bed sheet over the ceiling fan. And it worked. It was great. They were very inspiring.
You got to
It's
use.
cool.
You can use anything out there too. Yeah,
Yeah, use what you have.
I love
Yeah, I had a
Pamplemousse.
lot of preconceived notions around what it took to record. So when I recorded Sailing by the Moon, I was in a full-fledged recording studio with incredible equipment, with a professional producer, with studio
Mm.
musicians. I mean, all of that was like 10 out of 10 professional grade experience. And then a year later, I was trying to make To London with Love, and I did that challenge where I wanted to make an album with $1,000. And obviously for $1,000 you cannot record a London
Mm.
an album in London, England. That would be a drop in the bucket of what you would need to do so. And so the $1,000, I was like, all right, I'm gonna order myself a microphone. I'm gonna make sure I have the right cables and stands and whatever. I've got my keyboard, But it was it was interesting to think about, how can I create music that sounds, you know I will say the London songs do not sound as professional as the Sailing by the Moon songs, but I would like to think that they're just as enjoyable and accessible. And from the listener side, that the recording quality doesn't get in the way of the experience of listening to and receiving the song, which was my goal. Like, can I figure out a way to do that myself
Yeah.
with no real experience, in like recording equipment or acoustics or any of those things. And so, anyway, Pomplamoose was inspiring because they kind of opened the door like, yeah, try it, give it a shot, try it in your bedroom, see how it goes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Everyone, everything will be linked down below, including her two wonderful albums, To London with Love, Sailing by the Moon. Check that out. Can you share a specific way in which you aim to positively impact the lives of others?
Yes, I hope to help people connect with their creativity in a way that matters to them. And I hope to walk alongside people in whatever capacity through achieving the artistic experience they want to have and finding the creative fulfillment they want to find and helping them do that in the real life they're living right now, whatever that looks like. And if they experience what I've experienced from doing that, it would be tremendously positive. It's really important to me to help people build a strong relationship with their own creativity. And actually, I put together a little quiz to help people do that. It's a free self assessment. I call it my spark or sputter test. It takes about 10 minutes to complete. It's completely free. You don't even need to give an email to download it. So if someone's listening to this and wanting to take a pulse on their creative well-being and maybe learn some ways they can improve it, then that test is a great place to start. And it's totally free. It's at laurenspangler.com/spark. And then if people want to see what's happening in my studio, this week I hang out on Instagram. I'm at Lauren Spangler, and I would love to connect there too.
You heard it. Definitely. Would love to
Thank you
do
so
that.
much, Chris. This has been a total blast. I appreciate your time, and it's just been a really fun conversation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to interview you, Lauren. I know we tried to set this up for a while, and I'm so glad we were able to get together today.
Me
So
too.
perfect magic right there. So we're going to end the stream. Everyone, Lauren Spangler, check out her website and her two albums down below from Spotify. And there's definitely going to be more music in the future, right? Almost
Absolutely.
already. As long as I get first dip on this new CD and autographed as well. Sound good.
Thanks, Chris.
You're very welcome, Lauren. Okay, everyone.
Unforgettable, that's what you are. Unforgettable, though near or far. Like a song of love that clings to me, how the thought of you does things to me. Never before has someone been more unforgettable in every way. And forevermore, that's how you'll stay. That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks that I am unforgettable too.